Cynicism today is synonymous with insensitivity, with a bitter willingness to become an accomplice to anything at any cost. The cynicism of the ancients, or what Nietzsche called cynismus, had a very different nature, an extreme form of self-defense that opposed an irreducible core of survival to the threat of social absurdity, the vital audacity of a lived philosophy. If the cynic Diogenes lived in a barrel, the modern cynic aspires instead to power and success. Before delving into the greatest exponent of cynicism, Diogenes, nicknamed the Mad Socrates, we will see all the anecdotes and understand that being defined as mad was even reductive. Or the dog. Let's look at the origin of cynicism, dated around 400 BC. Antisthenes was acclaimed by the ancients as the pioneer of cynicism and the foremost exponent among the cynics. The scholar cites ancient sources and delves into the etymology of the word cynic. The term cynic derives from dog, alluding to a lifestyle that is essentially stray, deliberately distanced from the classical norms of the polis. As a disciple of Socrates, Antisthenes highlighted different aspects of the master compared to those emphasized by Plato. Antisthenes emphasized qualities like courage, self-sufficiency, endurance in adversity, and complete freedom. The essence of cynicism, as initiated by its founder, carries strong anti-social and anti-political undertones, advocating the principle of having no need for anything. Cynicism aims to challenge humanity's grand illusions, such as the pursuit of wealth, power, fame, and pleasure, seeking instead a happiness rooted in living in harmony with nature and embracing self-reliance. However, cynicism, rather than being anchored in books or precepts, finds its true expression in the deeds of its key figures, including Antisthenes, Diogenes, and Crates of Thebes. This philosophical current lacks positive values to promote. It will be Diogenes who takes cynicism to even more extreme levels, rejecting societal structures, social classes, marriage, and even the very concept of the polis itself. Diogenes had quite the encounter with Antisthenes. Initially, Antisthenes wanted nothing to do with him and flat out rejected him. However, Diogenes persisted and persevered until he finally got his way. When Antisthenes threatened Diogenes with a stick, Diogenes, bowing his head, calmly responded, "Go ahead, beat me if you like, but you won't find a stick tough enough to make me stop listening. Eventually, you'll have to say something." And so, Diogenes became his disciple, embracing a frugal lifestyle suitable for an exile. He made a point of always being critical in public. His mission was to demonstrate to people that civilization is regressive and to show, through his own example, that wisdom and happiness belong to those who are independent, uncivilized from society. He mocked not only the family, the political and social order, but also the concepts of property and good reputation. One of the most striking aspects of his philosophy was his rejection of conventional notions of decency. There are countless anecdotes. Diogenes ate in the marketplace, lived in a barrel, defecated in the public theater, masturbated in public, and openly insulted his interlocutors. One could simplify it as a philosophy of scandal. His admirers saw him as a man devoted to reason and exemplary honesty, while his detractors viewed him as an irritating and uncouth madman. According to the biographer Diogenes Laertius, Plato labeled him Zazans a deranged Socrates. Diogenes undoubtedly stood out as the quintessential embodiment of cynicism through his life's example. numerous tales and depictions have emerged around this persona, such as his habit of wandering with a lantern in search of an honest individual. He intentionally provoked disruption and scandal, even engaging in public acts like masturbation to make a point. When confronted, he would retort, "What harm is there if I ease my hunger by rubbing my belly?" The cynic is a renegade thinker, uncivil, independent, and irksome, continuing to play with etymology as a stray dog. Figures like Antisthenes and Diogenes define themselves as global citizens because their influence extends to all, transcending allegiance to any specific city. The polis would soon become irrelevant. According to the invaluable source, Lives of the Philosophers by Diogenes Laertius, Diogenes was the first to coin the term cosmopolitan, a remarkable statement in an era where one's identity was intrinsically linked to their affiliation with the polis. The thinking of Peter Sloterdijk in his Critique of Cynical Reason is exemplary. According to him, the experience of contemporary times is characterized and defined by the presence of cynicism. This manifests as a response to a crisis, a theme that is now more evident than ever. The German thinker distinguishes between ancient cynicism, called Kynismus in German, and modern cynicism, termed Zynismus. Modern cynicism has shifted from its original sense and is now synonymous with insensitivity and resignation, a perpetual readiness to become complicit in anything, and a critical awareness of a contemporary society that sustains dishonest actions. In the ancient cynicism of Diogenes and Antisthenes, criticism of conventions was inseparable from the rejection of any compromise. With Diogenes, whom Sloterdijk labels as a hobo philosopher, Western philosophy begins a resistance to the deceit of discourse, dialogue. He rejects the deception of ideological abstraction. In particular, Diogenes identifies nature as the foundation of wise living. The cynical philosopher is one who rejects social conventions and prefers to adhere to nature, living apart from the induced needs of society. Diogenes' role models are beggars and children. Children for their simplicity not yet corrupted by the civility of good manners, and beggars for their self-sufficiency and ability to live in a wandering manner, distant from the ways of civilization and its progress. Based on these premises, Diogenes ostentatiously rejects conventions and all taboos. Not surprisingly, much of his main philosophical insights are presented to us in the form of anecdotes that blatantly exhibit his gestures against civilization, against society. Well known is, for example, his rejection of all the goods of society and its progress. For instance, it is said that once, when he saw a child drinking with his hands, he threw away his own bowl and said, "This boy has taught me that I can do without even this simple bowl, and can drink with my hands." In particular, Diogenes the Cynic rejected eating cooked meats, sophisticated dishes, and of course, wealth as a form of ostentation. But he also rejected glory, the idea of power. The cynic, through a rigorous process of asceticism, trains himself to devalue everything that civilization produces, the nomos, convention, and he does so not just with theoretical compositions, but with concrete examples of life. Regarding this matter, there's a telling anecdote where once Alexander the Great spotted the philosopher Diogenes sunbathing and asked, "Tell me what I can do for you." In a display of disdain for power, Diogenes replied, "Get out of my sunlight," meaning, "Move aside and let me bask in peace." On another occasion, According to this rich anecdotal tradition, the refined philosopher Aristippus complained to Diogenes, saying, "If you had learned to respect power, you wouldn't have to eat this rubbish," referring to lentils. Diogenes retorted, "And if you had learned to be content with this rubbish, lentils, you wouldn't have to flatter power." Michel Foucault, in some of his 20th century lectures, used the category of the parrhesiast to primarily allude to the figure of Diogenes the Cynic. Who is the parrhesiast? Pan-rhema, the one who speaks everything, is the one who boldly speaks truth to power, as Diogenes does to Alexander the Great, disregarding the asymmetrical power relations, and indeed using this asymmetry as a fundamental way to speak the truth. Truth does not fear power. This way, the cynical philosopher aims to place himself in a situation that is both exceptional and marginal compared to the life of the citizen engaged in the polis. Indeed, detachment from the life of the polis is one of the fundamental traits of cynical life. There's a complete rupture between the citizen of public life and the philosopher. Essentially, with Diogenes the Cynic, life itself becomes the testing ground for philosophy. Philosophizing means for Diogenes the Cynic living philosophically, that is, in the cynical manner, like a stray dog that does not yield to power and remains true to itself, and who, when necessary, confronts the truth directly to power. Let's delve deeper into Diogenes' life by recounting some more flavorful anecdotes. It is said that when the philosopher was captured and put up for sale in the slave market, he was asked what skills he possessed. In response, he quipped, "Commanding men," and then boldly instructed the auctioneer, "Inquire if anyone is in need of purchasing a master." And even though he was denied the opportunity to sit down, he retorted, "It matters little, for even fish in the marketplace, arranged however you please, still find buyers." Diogenes believed that items of great value are often sold for a pittance, and vice versa. For instance, while a statue might fetch 3,000 drachmas, a quarter of flour might sell for just 2 copper coins. Cynicism, who was purchasing him at the slave market, declared, "Very well, you shall have to obey my commands." Diogenes countered, "Rivers return to their sources." To this, Cynicism replied, "If I bought a doctor and fell ill, would I follow his prescriptions or stand there pontificating?" In his work entitled The Sale of Diogenes, Eulo recounts how Diogenes, entrusted with the education of Cynicis's children, his master, sought to instill in them a love for memorizing literary passages from poets and prose writers, as well as excerpts from Diogenes' own writings. Meanwhile, he made it his mission to find the most efficient and educationally appropriate methods to help them develop a rock-solid memory. At home, he taught them self-reliance and responsibility, encouraging them to consume simple foods and drink only water, to shave their heads and eschew all adornments and trinkets. He trained them to go outdoors without tunics or sandals, to maintain silence, and to focus on themselves. Occasionally, he would take them along for hunting excursions. In turn, the boys reciprocated Diogenes' care, attending to his needs and conveying his requests to their parents. Eulo also reports that Diogenes spent his old age with Cyniades, and when the philosopher died, it was his children who arranged his funeral. When Cyniades asked him how he wished to be buried, Diogenes replied, "Face down." "Why is that?" Cyniades inquired. Diogenes retorted, so that everything will soon be turned upside down, alluding to the rise of the Macedonians from humble mountain dwellers to powerful conquerors. Once, a fellow ushered him into a luxurious abode, but rudely instructed him not to spit. Diogenes, clearing his throat thoroughly, spat in his face, remarking that he couldn't find a worse place than that. In the first book of Sentences, Echatone recounts that Diogenes once called out loudly, "Hey men, step forward." When a crowd gathered around him, he began thrashing about with his stick, saying, "I called for men, not rubbish." To those who said, "Come on, you're old now, give it up," he replied, "If I were running a long-distance race and nearing the finish line, would you expect me to quit, or rather exert myself for the final sprint?" When someone expressed a desire to study philosophy under him, he handed them a fish and ordered them to follow him. Ashamed to carry it, the person threw it away and disappeared. Sometime later, Diogenes encountered them on the road and, laughing, said, "It took just one fish to dissolve our friendship." Once, while observing a boy drinking from his cupped hands, he discarded his bowl from his pouch, exclaiming, "A boy has outdone me in frugality." He also threw away his bowl upon seeing another boy, who, having broken his own, was eating lentils using the hollow of a loaf of bread. On one occasion, Diogenes was engaged in a serious discourse, but nobody approached him. So he began mimicking a bird, and immediately a large number of people gathered around him, though he rebuked the audience, who were all eager to hear nonsense, but hesitated when it came to listening to serious speeches. He often said that tragic curses had befallen him, as he was without a city, without shelter, banished from his homeland, poor and a wanderer. "Living for the day?" he often repeated, opposing fortune with courage, law with nature, passion with reason. He used perfume on his feet, reasoning, "From the head, the scent disperses into the air, but from the feet, it rises to the nostrils." Regarding the mice crawling on his dining table, he remarked, "Well, even Diogenes raises parasites," alluding to his adversary, Plato. Plato had just coined the definition of man as a featherless biped. To this definition, Diogenes plucked a rooster, brought it to the assembly without feathers, and exclaimed, "Behold Plato's man." For this, the definition was amended to include "with broad nails." To someone seeking advice on the best time for breakfast, he dismissed them with the quip, "If you're rich, whenever you want. If you're poor, whenever you can." Now that we've understood Diogenes' figure, we cannot overlook the fact that the principles of his philosophy, including non-attachment to material possessions, are found in many other renowned philosophies, such as Stoicism, which emerged after him, Buddhism, and Taoism. Diogenes' importance as a precursor to such ideals is often underestimated.